So, welcome to another edition of On My Couch. So, today we're going to build on a great conversation we had previously with Trevor Dill. So, Trevor recently joined IMC Group and after an extensive career in retail, shopping centre management, and also retail development. So, today we've got Edmond Krecsik with me. I knew I would get that wrong, Edmund. I do apologise. We've got Edmund with us. So we've got Edmund with us, and we're going to continue that discussion on the similar themes. But before we get started, maybe Edmund, introduce yourself, correctly pronounce your surname so I can get that right, and then maybe answer these questions. Who are you? What do you do? And why?
Yeah, so my name is Edmond Krecsik, so it
Thank
was
you.
very close.
Yeah.
I'm the director and co-founder of RK Commercial, based here on the Gold Coast in Queensland. RK Commercial is a retail-led commercial property firm. We specialise in leasing, sales, asset management, and advisory across retail and mixed-use assets. We try and help landlords get the most out of their retail assets, mainly by managing them more actively than most. We've come across that most commercial assets are managed very passively. That leaves some, in our opinion, a lot of real value on the table that isn't utilized correctly. So I spent over a decade in the institutional field working in shopping centers, watching it done correctly by
Yep.
correct leaders and management. So we exist to try help clients achieve exactly that.
Terrific. Thank you. And thanks for joining us this morning. Sue, maybe you introduce yourself in the same way. Who are you and what do you do and then why?
Okay, thanks, Damien. So, retail property and marketing professional with 30 plus years experience across large corporates, listed privates and not-for-profits. And at the heart of every business is people. And so working with people is my why. And it's powerful because it turns individual momentum to creating outcomes and that none of us could achieve on its own. And it also builds connections. So that's sort of my why and my background.
Awesome, terrific. And my name Damien O'Malley, founder of OMC Group, and what we do is we do leadership development, team effectiveness, culture, and strategy. And our why, very similar to Sue. My why is that I love helping people work better together, and I think when people work better together, we actually achieve more as well. So that's my why. So Sue, maybe you get us started.
Okay, thanks, Damien. So I think you established that we're going to talk about some themes today. And so the
Yep.
first theme is really about Edmund's personal story and the journey behind the career. So Edmund, going to hit you up with a couple of questions. So what originally attracted you to commercial and retail property world, and what would be some of the early experiences that shaped your approach?
Well, funnily, I did not set out to be in commercial property. I had no intention. It was pure accident. I was finishing my law degree. A friend of mine in the industry who worked for CBRE at the time knew of an associate role that was coming up for one of the largest private shopping centre landlords in Australia. And it all sounded way better than working for a law firm. So I thought, great. I knew I was good at sales and I had a lot of experience in that. So I managed to get the job as an associate role. Funny enough, the first centre that I worked on had a 25% vacancy. So the company that I worked for bought it only a year prior to that. So if I was experienced enough, I probably would have said no. But the lack of experience actually worked out really well because from day one, I was very much immersed in retail precincts. I had great mentorship, great leadership from my boss at time, or my report, who ended up now being my business partner as well. So it was pretty much full steam ahead from day one. A lot of meetings with retailers. And obviously we had a pretty big job ahead of us with turning that shopping centre around. About 2 years in, I was promoted to head up the leasing for the South Australian assets for the company. And we were also and I got to project lease a shopping centre that we were developing, which was a $75 million sub-regional shopping centre that we were developing in Port Adelaide. So for me, that's pretty much where retail clicked. It was definitely not just my first experience walking into a quarter empty center, but also doing a large development taught me a lot about retail and what is valuable in shopping centers and what shapes retail precincts as well. So it was basically not to fear vacancy too much. If you have a blank canvas, it's actually a lot easier to then fill the space and compose it as well.
So that pivotal moment, talking to that guy from CBRE who put you onto the job, so that's how you got into the business. So what were there other moments or risks or challenges that significantly influenced you and who you are as a leader and a property professional today?
Definitely the time working on the shopping centre development. So halfway through the project leasing and the development, we went into COVID. So it was a very difficult time trying to fill 50 plus retailers into a shopping centre when everyone was locked at home and consumer spending basically disappeared overnight. But at that time, I was probably inexperienced to realize that there's always cycles, there's always downturns, there's always hardships, there's always something, curveballs that people get thrown at. I was again lucky that I had a great mentor, and the CEO of the company that I was working for had a lot of experience in the field. So over time, with the development, you sort of just realize that it's every day it's back to the same thing you did yesterday, regardless of what's happening in the what other outer influences there are. So that was a really good resilience training for me. And I guess the second part was probably most recently when I decided to walk away from a senior executive role that I was in for a decade to start our own company.
Okay, that's great.
Which might be oh, sorry, Sue. Oh, Sue's frozen a little bit. Sue, are you there?
Damien, off you go.
Okay, cool. All right. This is a casual conversation. I mean, we did say that, didn't we? Yeah, we're sort of keep it nice and relaxed. So, I mean, that was a nice segue, because one of the things you started with talking us a little bit about, your arcade commercial, and just can you just expand a little on that a little bit, and what's your your key focus areas?
Sure. We're a director-led company, so very lean, director-led. We try and be in all negotiations, tenant representation, rent reviews, client meetings. We're trying to provide an institutional level of insight to smaller mum and dad family office, or clients who have a lot of commercial holdings, but they possibly don't have the commercial experience to realize how to release the most value out of the assets. So we are new. So right now, my key role and main focus is to grow the business and grow brand awareness about us. And it's about educating how to lease and manage assets, and how we can prepare these clients as well for potential headwinds and market cycles. But look, anyone can collect rent and do the back of house admin stuff. That skill is it's very common in property management. For us, we try and take an approach where we manage the assets like they were our own.
Gotcha. And so just building on that a little bit, because you did talk about sort of there's, I think you use the words, passive. Sometimes assets are passive. So from your perspective, what differentiates a high-performing, retail or commercial assets from those that might be sort of struggling a little bit to maintain relevance? What's the difference in what difference at high performance?
Well, tenancy mix is one thing. It's you can have a fantastic asset, but if you don't have the right tenants in there, you don't have the right covenants, you don't have the right security, then it doesn't really become the great asset based on the location alone. So I mean, an example where we've got a client in Byron Bay that we've recently picked up, and we've taken over management from an existing agent. And they've got a national tenant in there, which for a mum and dad or small client, they think that that is the best and safest tenant you can possibly have, because they're national, they're listed on the ASX, they've got dozens of brands under their name. Now, due to our research and our conversation with the tenant, right, we find out that that is one of the most underperforming stores in their portfolio. And when it comes to the rent renewal in a couple of years' time, they're going to look at possibly closing the store. So having that foresight is not your typical property management set of skills. And that's just purely because we, again, both me and my business partner, we were fortunate enough to work in shopping centers and deal with retailers and understand how to prepare for future events, for vacancies, and what we need to do to look at extracting the most value, but also to ensure that there is no downturn or minimize the downtime in vacancy and lack of rent.
Gotcha. Sue, I might just ask one more question and then I'll hand over to you. So shifts, we talked about, you talked about your experience of COVID and we're I'm in Victoria, which has got some financial challenges at the moment, but, so what's been the shift in landlord priorities over the past few years that you've noticed?
Well, there is a much greater expectation from retailers for landlord support. And I mean, over the last 6 years, we've had a massive increase in construction costs, which has trickled down not just to residential, but commercial, but then also retail fit outs. So with elevated interest rates, higher inflation, you're starting to see less and less retailers wanting to take on a new fit out or take on a new shop or new lease on their own. So there is this expectation where, especially some of the larger projects where there's some form of partnership between the operators and the landlords, they obviously want fit out support, sensible reviews. There was a time where, it was CPI plus a fixed percentage. Barely anyone does that anymore because we're going through a pretty elevated, higher inflation environment over the next 5 years, as opposed to the last 18, 20 years where we were in a downward trend as far as inflation and interest rates. But in saying that, I think landlords are waking up to the fact that a thriving tenant is the cheapest form of capital growth there is.
Cool. Sue?
That's a great way to put it. So we've talked about some of the current retail trends that you talked about in terms of the retailer and landlord relationship and what they're looking for. But I might just jump us to the future. So what do you see as and you mentioned this when you were talking to your retailer about the lease renewal potentially down the road. So what do you see are the trends or the opportunities for owners and operators and investors that they should be paying closer attention to in that next the short to medium term future?
I think supply is probably the number one thing. There is lack of supply and a very high population growth in certain areas. So when you have that, you're naturally going to have elevated asset prices. I mean, for example, right now, the biggest headline that I see going around is that retail is in trouble. When in the surface, it's actually the complete opposite. Retail for the last 3 years has been the most commercially traded asset in Australia. Occupancy is near 99%, vacancies under 5% on a national level. And the pure reason for that is we stopped building. A lot of constructions and developments, they don't have the same feasibility as they did 5 years ago. So the new supply is well below population needs. Construction costs are outrageous and punishing, and many assets priced well below their replacement cost. So I think the value is in owning and managing existing retail or commercial property assets as opposed to building new ones. But in saying that, there's markets within markets, and there's always going to be certain areas that are going to be tougher than other areas. And that goes to retail sectors as well. So perfect example is fashion category. retail group, retail apparel group, which is a fashion offering. Their quarter sales in Australia were down 1.5%. Whereas Universal Store is tracking at about 9%, almost double-digit growth which is plus 9%, not negative 9%. Now, both are fashion, so if you look at them side by side, you think, well, fashion is doing fantastic if you've got 9% growth. So what's happening with the other one? And that just speaks a lot of the consumer that is shopping at both of those groups. And I think that speaks a lot of what is driving successful assets, successful retail strips, successful shopping centers, because we are very much now an entertainment, dining, and how do you curate a precinct where you draw people back that you cannot replace anywhere else, you cannot get online. So for me personally, there's a lot of negative headlines. There's a lot of talk about more rate rises, petrol prices going up further, the Middle East crisis. Sorry, I just dropped out. I think you got to focus on the core fundamentals of commercial property, and that the headwinds and the lack of development and the population growth. I think it's something where some of these great retail and commercial assets will be in high demand over time.
Interesting. I've been reading, doing this course recently, and they talked about the millennials and the next generation, and where they're very focused on sustainability and scarcity and that unique product. And they were saying that the second-hand market, or the renting market, particularly for the luxe brands, is a trend that's coming through. A question without notice. Are you seeing any of that happen, or do you think that's still a little way away yet?
I think, I mean, you're going to have a lot of caution from consumers, I think, for discretionary items. I mean, it's definitely a trend that you're seeing happen more and more, and the spending is more in the non-discretionary as well. As far as the second-hand market, it seems like to me that there's a cycle that goes on with that as well. I mean, I don't know if you know satire or satir. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly, but over COVID or just post-COVID, I mean, they had a huge boom. As soon as interest rates came back up, their share price crashed about 90%. Now there's talk of them moving over to the overseas market and trying the Europe and America. So I think there's always going to be a place for items like that. There's always going to be a place for people wanting the luxe and most premium items and get a discount for that. Yeah, I mean, it's all, again, it's some markets within markets, and if you've got a great product and a great offering that can replicate what some of the greats are doing, then yeah, I think there's always going to be a place for it.
Yeah, it's interesting. The other thing they go on to say is that the bricks and mortar are probably never going to go away. They're just going to have to work differently and respond differently, which is, I think, what you've been saying all the way through. It's about, doing the same job today, but the environment may be totally different that you're working within. So yeah, it's a never 2 day. I think the saying is there's no 2 days the same, and that's probably right.
Well, you've got to look at, I mean, department stores and fashion stores are the perfect example. 15, 20 years ago, if you were developing a shopping center, the only thing you wanted to put in there is the biggest department store there was, and the best fashion operators. Now you look at it, and it's very much driven about service and entertainment and experience. I mean, you don't see many fashion stores in the smaller sub-regional neighborhood shopping centers, because people are spending less time shopping for themselves. They do all the research online. Now, yes, there's probably an argument that some people buy it online, but you can't experience and feel the same experience looking at a top or looking at swimmers or a pair of jeans online, or when you're actually in the store feeling it and trying it on. So what you've got is there's less visitation to these centers and retail strips. However, the goal is when those people do come and visit, how do you maximize their time and get them to spend as much time, as much money while they're there, because you know that the visitation frequency is less.
Well, I might shift gears a little bit if I could, because I've got two marketing retail professionals that I think could keep on going for hours. But I'm gonna focus on shift the focus a little bit onto leadership and culture, which is sort of what we do at IMC Group. And clearly you talked very I think very appreciative of the leaders that you've come across when you're working in your previous roles. So, from a leadership perspective, in your experience, what does strong leadership look like in high pressure, commercially driven environments that you've worked in? So, that's my question. What does strong, good leadership look like when you're under pressure?
Having clarity.
Yep.
That's probably the biggest thing I've learned. Whether that's a deal is on the line, or if it's something like a once in 100-year pandemic that comes through.
Yep.
People don't need motivational speeches. They don't need someone to tell them, stand up and tell them, everything's going to be okay. They need to know exactly what matters and what doesn't. It's very commercial. The best leaders that I worked under made the complex feel simple. And then the weak ones made the simple feel complex and called it rigor.
Right.
And it's again, it took me some time, probably age and a lot of experience and a lot of self-reflection to understand how important and what a fundamental impact not just a person or an executive, but an entire company can have by having the right leadership.
Terrific. And then just building on that a little bit, because then I want to sort of touch on culture, which is something also that, Sue and I are really interested in as well. So what have you seen that works in terms of creating strong cultures? As we know, culture leads to long-term, great cultures lead to great long-term performance. So what have you seen that, from your perspectives, that leaders do that create strong cultures?
Culture is one of the only durable advantages a company has. Everything else can be copied. Culture cannot. You cannot manufacture it, and you cannot fake it. That's one of those parts. One of I think the fundamental parts of a business that is so important to have, because we talked about leadership before, a great culture builds on great leadership. It's something that we at Arcade Commercial, we thrive, and we make a conscious effort to continue that regard and hold leadership and culture at the front of all of our discussions and meetings, because it's got to be done. I think there's been many great companies and many great businesses that don't recognize or have had great losses and disadvantages when they lose great leadership, and as a result, the culture goes away with it as well.
Yeah, terrific. Sue, have you got a final question for Edmond?
So I suppose what advice that you would give you're an emerging leader, you're starting your own business. So what advice would you give emerging leaders to about understanding expectations with regards to people leadership? How do you balance performance and people leadership?
Do not treat performance and people as a trade-off. The performance comes through the people, not despite them. So early on my career, I thought performance was everything and only focused on my own results. I don't have the greatest set of skills. I wouldn't say that I'm the most intelligent person. But I knew one thing, and I was an extremely hard worker. And if I didn't understand something, or something new was thrown at me, instead of saying no, I don't have the set of skills or the knowledge to do it. Please pass it on to someone else. I tried to find any way that set of responsibilities and tasks would be thrown at me, and I would do anything in my power to learn and work long hours just to make sure that I understood it and I could fulfill the requirements. But that came at a great cost, because I became very focused and self-centered at times, and I thought that my performance would be a reflection of the company's performance. So it was a great learning lesson to realize that the moment you lead people, your performance is measured by theirs, not yours. The job shifts from how do I win to how do I help them win.
Awesome! What a great great note to finish on. I could certainly keep asking more questions, but that was sensational. So thank you very much, Sue. Insights? What did Edmond get you thinking about today?
So a couple of things for me. One was at the very, very start, like say yes, because sometimes the best opportunity comes about by saying yes. You don't always have to have the same knowledge. And even in the example that Edmond just gave about the leadership role, sometimes it's about saying yes. And probably leadership doesn't have to be complex. It's just got to be genuine and real. And I think sometimes, you can read lots of papers about what leaders should do and study and this and that. But at the end of the day, as we started, it's a people business. And so you've got to be genuine and real. So thank you, Edmond. They were my two takeaways for today.
Love it. Yeah, love it. And Edmond, thank you very much for joining us. So, if people do want to tap into your expertise, where do they find you?
Best place is website, RK Commercial. So that's the letter R, letter K, commercial.com.au. Or you can find me on LinkedIn, Edmond Krecsik. Fortunately, on LinkedIn, you just have to type it. You don't have to pronounce it. So you'll find it pretty easy.
Good. That's helpful for people like me.
But look, I just want to thank you, Damien, and Sue as well. This is great to come on and talk with you guys and share some experiences and continue growing.
Awesome. Terrific. Thank you so much for joining us. So, if you want to find more about IMC Group, similarly on the web, imc-group.com.au. We look forward to bringing you our next episode of On My Couch. So thank you, Edmond. Thank you, Sue.
Thank you.
Thank you.